poker's legendary champions, next generation stars, and tireless ambassadors of the game, sharing their wisdom and guiding your journey to high achievement on the green felt. This is Chasing Poker Greatness with your host, Brad Wilson.
Well, hello there, my friend, and welcome to the Chasing Poker Greatness podcast. As always, this is your host, the founder of ChasingPokerGreatness.com, Brad Wilson, and today's guest on the show is WSOP Gold Bracelet winner and high-stakes crusher / degen Alex Thallo Epstein. Thallo and I recently met while providing commentary in the Polk versus Negreanu challenge over on the Solve for Why YouTube, and it quickly became obvious to me that I had to get this dude onto the podcast. He's a hilarious and highly intelligent human being who has absolutely no fear in speaking his mind, which means you're about to hear some amazing behind-the-scenes, high-stakes poker stories. If that's the kind of thing you're into, I would suggest sticking around. In today's episode, you're going to learn all about the roller coaster ride Thallo took to hopping into the nosebleed streets, why Thallo was once invited to a private game and what led to him punching the whale square in the mouth, what really went down a few months back when Bilzerian accused JRB of cheating him in a home game, and much, much more. So without any further ado, I bring to you the rambling, gambling, Las Vegas high-stakes private game mainstay, Alex Thallo Epstein. Thallo, welcome to the show, sir. How you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, man. It was super fun doing the play-by-play for Solve for Why, despite neither of us being heads-up specialists or knowing very much about heads-up, no-limit hold'em strategy.
It was an adventure. Yeah, I got to test my commentary bluffing range, I guess. We made a lot of stuff up on the fly, but I think we got away with most of it.
Yeah, I think we got away with most of it. I think you missed my round 2 where me and Andre did it, and they ended up playing over, and I got high, and by the end of it, I was like barely coherent. It was like an hour and a half after the edible.
Well, now I'm gonna have to go back and check that out because that sounds much more entertaining to watch than most coverages.
I felt immediate shame afterwards.
I think you should move the edibles portion up earlier to take that chance, make that a lot more likely towards the end of streams.
Yeah, I think I talked trash to the audience that wasn't even my audience. You know, it was Solve for Why's audience. I got high on stream on not my brand. Wasn't my finest hour.
I am sorry I missed that. And if I co-commentate No Limit Hold'em again, I may want to have that experience.
Yeah.
You may have to play do some sort of prop bet where loser has to take the edible earlier in the stream and get that rolling.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine with me, man. So typically starting out the show, I ask my guest about their story. So tell me the story. How did you get involved playing cards?
Yeah, I've played poker recreationally since I was 8 or 9. Always loved it. Always played card games, played hearts, played Magic, played a little bit of bridge, got into poker later, took it a little bit more seriously starting at 18, moved out and was on my own at 17, 18, and was using that as a side source of income, playing on full tilt at 18. But never really, quote unquote, professionally, still always pretty much recreationally.
How old are you?
I'm 29 now.
You're 29. So
Yep.
17 was 12 years ago. So we're talking 2009.
Yep.
And you moved out of your house when you were 17. Like, how did that come about?
Just one of those things that happened. My parents and I never really saw eye to eye on anything, I guess. And it was easier for me to head my own way a little bit early before my senior year of high school. And I had saved up a bit from poker, and I had my first fake ID. Most kids I know it's to drink, but my fake ID was to play in an 18 plus casino. I think it was it's like in Rancho Cordero or something, California. There was this 18 plus casino that I would drive an hour and a half to play at 16 and 17.
Yeah. And were you winning?
I was, fortunately. I don't know. I have no idea if that was just luck at the time, or everybody else was terrible. But yeah, I did okay as a 17-year-old and did okay as an 18-year-old, enough to pay some bills at the time.
And you mentioned real estate. So you move out at 17.
Yep.
What was your plan when you moved out?
The plan was to go to college, and then I had started going. I had gotten into Cal at the time and was paying for my own tuition and taking on student debt. But I ended up getting my real estate license at 18 in my first semester of college, and really enjoyed it, and just decided to go with that. Dropped out less than a full semester into school, and just pursued real estate and focused on that for about the last 10 years up until December 2018, maybe late fall, early winter of 2018, when I had saved up a bit of money and wanted to give poker more of a legitimate shot.
And I know that, you play some really big games, right? Like you play some really big games. Like, seems like you had to be taking poker somewhat seriously in the meantime.
No, I hadn't played any too big games before then. So March of 2019, and one of the first tournaments I played after taking seriously was Battle of the Bay, $1,000 buy-in in the Bay Area, probably the biggest tournament in Northern California. I ended up banking that, and because that went so well, won that for about 100. Decided to set aside, say, I'm just going to take this money, go to Vegas for the summer for WSOP. I've never had the full WSOP experience, and let's see what happens. And the first major tournament I played in was the 10K short deck, and ended up winning that. And then that's when the big games really started, because at that tournament is when I met Ben Lamb, Depa, and a few of those guys who are playing in all the private games. And those branched off into everything from the Beverly Hills PLO private games to these insane short deck PLO games, which I don't think a lot of people even know are, and probably should not be a game. It's essentially roulette on steroids. But this short deck PLO game that we would play, that was absolutely insane, with Sean Winter and Sam Sobrel and Depa and those guys.
It seems like you've lived a charm poker career.
When it's going well, it's going great. When it's going poorly, it's going really poorly. That's one of the issues with playing probably above your bankroll almost at all times, right? Is that the highs are amazing and the lows are extra stressful.
Tell me about that, playing above your bankroll most of the time, right? Like,
yeah, so I spent 6 months straight in the lab studying, getting ready to go to Vegas with a 100K bankroll to play PLO. That was the plan. And, when most people who are going to attempt to be a poker professional do that, they do some bankroll research and understand what stakes they're supposed to play. I had, looked into it a little bit, but I guess can't fight my own nature. And instead of going into whatever size games you should be playing for a 100K bankroll, I think the first game I played was the 5,100 PLO when I got to Vegas. And I started very poorly. I lost my first 4 sessions, was down about 45,000 of the 100K, I think, in the first 4 sessions that I played. And instead of scaling back, I go, we should probably calm down. My next decision was to hop in the 10K short deck. Yeah, so I don't know. My bankroll management and decision making at the time was probably not the best, but fortunately it worked out. That's why I people who know me and we joke often as well. I certainly have been prone to have some very good runs. I'm probably also prone to crash back down to earth as much as anybody.
And where does this lack of risk aversion come from? Like, was it the same way in real estate?
No, I think that one for me is very obvious. It is the real estate background. So because I have not just a real estate license, but a brokerage license and a background in that where I can put my head down and work for a couple years if need to be, I think that makes me a lot less risk averse in poker. I know I have something that I can fall back to. I have a real estate company that's mine. It's just on hold, sort of sitting there right now, but I keep in touch with a lot of my clients. And if there was a time where I needed to go back to that, I do feel comfortable that I could do so, which allows me to take gambles I think other people probably shouldn't.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, right? You've got a redundancy, you've got a lifeline in case everything kind of goes to hell in a handbasket. So, people take bankroll management very, very seriously and very, very strict and very, very literal and to the word. And like every person's life situation is so different. And so like, just do what makes sense for you. At least have a logical plan that makes sense for you and then go from there, you know?
Although I do think the vast majority of people err on the wrong side of that. This is so I've gotten into coaching a bit over the last, I guess, 12 months. COVID has freed up a lot of time. Because of that, some of my friends who weren't into poker started playing poker a little bit more seriously, asked me to do some coaching. I really enjoyed it, and it went really well with them. I was doing a sort of a for-profit coaching system with them and taking a piece, and it ended up going so well that I opened up the coaching to some more people. One of the main things I've learned in that, and just with talking to people, is how many people really don't have a concept of the variance and swings that are possible in poker. You have guys who will go on, a 10 buy-in losing session and think it's just the end of the world and it's half their bankroll. It's like, I'm not the right person to preach that, but if you're trying to take it seriously and you don't have supplemental income, what are you doing if a 10 buy-in session is devastating to your life and you're a PLO player? I mean, that's just insane.
Yeah. You're just living on the razor's edge,
Right.
I mean,
you're almost destined to fail at that point.
Yeah, you're going to go broke. Your risk of ruin is just way too high, and it's pretty inevitable, especially like if you're that type of person. I have to imagine that you're also the type of person that likes spending money and probably lots of money, right? So lifestyle, even if you're winning at poker, like lifestyle can break you just as easily as playing above your bankroll.
Those do often go hand in hand, unfortunately. I'm probably guilty of that as well.
I would say like either extreme. I don't love either extreme, right? Like I don't love the guys that like want to play poker, but they start at micros and like only move up stakes is when they beat 10 no limit to 20 no limit. Like that just hurts my head. And
insane.
I cannot, like anybody listening to this podcast episode, don't go about poker that way. Like, please just.
No, the brain damage that you're going to incur from attempting that is just going to suck all of the joy out of it. And there's so few people who inevitably can make it up the stakes, beat the rake in every single stake they play, enough to move up to the next stake. Just absolutely brutal.
And then what ends up happening is like, yeah, congrats. You beat 20 no limit, and then you play 500 no limit, and like the game is a totally different game.
Right.
Like just because you've beat one stake doesn't mean you're prepared for the next stake, right?
Which is, you hear one of the things in coaching and some other stuff, you hear the ridiculous question all the time, hey, when am I ready to move up to the next stake? And that question is essentially impossible to answer. It completely depends on the foundation of your game, how you've learned poker, why you're beating the stake that you're at. There's just no way for a third person or really anybody to tell you that.
Right. I mean, I think that like the best gauge is like, where are you at in your life? Do you have a redundancy? And then just watch your play, somebody who's beaten the games that you're trying to move up to, and try to gauge whether or not you're a favorite.
Yeah. I got one of the weird things about getting to the highest stake, well, not the highest in the world, but the highest stakes that I can find essentially for poker, is that all the people in those games who are poker players are looking for a way out of poker at that point in life. Everybody who's at the table really in those games is on their last legs of poker and is trying to transition to something bigger and better. And you see that a lot as you climb the stakes. And it does make you realize finding some sort of alternate income source, finding something that is redundancy is very, very important.
Yeah. The irony, Thallo, is that, when I was playing high stakes at Commerce day in and day out, the irony for me was like all these businessmen are playing poker to get out of business. And all these poker players are playing poker to get out of poker. And it's like, basically, it's like the grass is always greener on the other side type of situation, right? Like the solution. I do think
it's like the businessmen hopefully are not trying to get out of business for poker as a career. I think they're trying to get out of it for poker as enjoyment.
Yeah. Like
I was one of the few idiots who was playing it to get into poker as a career going from business. I've run into everybody and their mother who's now trying to do the opposite thing. I'm the one moron who was like, this stable career is not really working out for me. I want to do something where I could lose my whole bankroll in a week.
It's more like I want to work for my entire life, build up a giant nest egg so that I can spend 60 hours playing poker with my life. Right. Which is it's just funny to me. Like the solution is neither one of those. It's more internal. It's not really externally based.
I agree with that completely.
So you've played in some pretty big private games, and because you're not risk averse, risk inclined, as they say. Tell me about these private games. I've heard a lot of stories, but I'd like to hear some good ones.
Yeah, so I wasn't aware when I first started off how many people sold action in these games, first of all, because I was too new to that stake of poker to even realize how prevalent action selling was. And one of the first private games that I played at was, I think it was it's 100, 200. Sometimes they straddle the 400, 40K cap is that game, PLO, just straight PLO. And this is shortly after I had won the short deck, but before playing in the PLO over the summer. So I would say my poker bankroll was maybe around 350,000 at the time. Going to this game, much, much lower than it obviously should be.
Yeah, you got 9 buy-ins.
Yeah, to the game. I was down already in the week, I think, probably around 100. So I was down to maybe about 250. And on that night, I was down another 100. So I had maybe, after just being as lucky as you could possibly be, banking the 10K short deck, living the dream, had managed to punt about 2/3 of that away already when we're up to this point. But the games were amazing. I knew I was a favorite in the games, but the variance is extremely high, and I knew downswings could happen, but wasn't going to stop at this point. I was in it until I was either going to go broke in these games or start beating these games. So I get in a pot that was probably for about half my remaining bankroll, potentially even a bit more. If I lost that pot, I don't know if I even could have afforded another full buy-in into the game. We were at the point of the night where one of the hosts in the game had pulled me aside and checked with me and go, "Hey man, you're sure you're okay?" Which in a private game, you don't see very often. Usually there's blood in the water, come after it. But I think he knew that was not, I was playing a little bit outside of my comfort zone. So I get in a pot with Tim Pham, who's this old school mixed game and PLO grinder. He I think he even has a couple bracelets, but a lot of the old guard will know him. The new guard will have no idea who he is. But he is notorious for only ever running it once, no matter the size of the pot, no matter who it is. That's all he does. So we get all in on about a 70-30 favorite here. I think it was something like top set versus a flush draw and a gutter. And I had a couple good blockers, something like that. Whatever it was 70-30. And Ben, who had been really sort of watched out for me, but who had gotten me into these games, Ben Lamb, who had become friends with this at this point, knows the magnitude of this pot. I think one other guy had gotten in and folded. There's probably 110,000 in the middle, a straddle the cap had. But in my net worth at the time is down to probably below 100 with counting the money that's in the middle. So this pot is for over half my net worth at the time. Ben, I think, is somewhat aware of that and asked him to run twice. I go, "Can we run twice?" Tim goes, "No." I asked, sort of trembling. Ben stops the deal and goes, Tim, can you run this one twice? And Tim goes, "No, man, I only run it once." And I'm just sitting there not really saying. Tim goes, Ben goes, "Tim, as a favor to me, I'd appreciate it if you'd run this one twice." Tim sits there for a second, thinks about it. He goes, "Nah, deal it." Dealer whips off 2 cards. Somehow I
Time out. While this is all going down, like, what are you feeling in this moment?
I'm so numb that I don't really remember at this point. Like I, for better or worse, have done a very good job in my poker career of taking the advice to heart. I think I heard this on a Poker After Dark one day. You can't think of the chips as real money. And I do a great job of not thinking of the chips as real money, which is probably why I find myself in these ridiculous positions. But yeah, I mean, I was just completely numb at that point to what was going on and just trying to play the cards as well as I could. So I asked him to run it twice. I would love to. I'm sure deep down I was terrified, but I was trying not to think about that. I was just I was almost like a passenger watching it happen in front of me. It was one of those moments.
Yeah, like disassociation.
Yeah, it was very surreal.
As they say, like, that was the one you needed.
No, 100%, yes, because there is a very high likelihood that if I don't hit that, I just buy in for the rest. Like, I don't think I'm going to walk away and be like, that was fun. I took a shot. Let's try something else. Just buy in for the rest. But at the end of it, so I won that pot, ended up being a winner on that session, ended up grinding back about about another 100,000 to end up being a small winner on the session. And then went on a streak of, I think I won 8 or 9 private games in a row. Just spun it up to the point where I wasn't even allowed in the games unless I was selling a piece to the game runners. Some of the older regulars in the game were started complaining about me even being given a seat. And it went from, I'm probably one bad beat away from being completely broke again, to restabilized and was able to calm down a bit.
Whew. Yeah, that's a roller coaster.
It was indeed.
Tell me about losing your seat, right? Like, how does this happen in private games? Like, what are the dynamics that kind of go and play?
Yeah, so the private game scene in general is just purely about networking, right? It's one of the few times that you're going to be playing poker professionally, and a lot of professional poker players who almost exclusively play in private games, your skill at poker is so incredibly secondary to your networking ability and ability to get a seat. So you need a draw. There needs to be a reason you're invited, and if that's not personality and notoriety, if you're not there because we've already exposed him, let's use Ben as the example. Ben gets into these games because he is just one of the most entertaining humans on the planet in these games. And the businessmen in these games, the recreational players, simply want the enjoyment of playing with him, the challenge and enjoyment of playing with him. When Ben, for anybody who knows him, will get a kick out of this, and I'm sure he will too. So Ben sent me a text the other day that said, I turned my hat backwards. What that means is Ben notoriously in these games has an alternative ego called Stephen Douglas. And at a certain point of the night, after enough drinks, for those of you who have never been to private games, this is the highest stakes poker you can think of, where almost everybody is drunk by a certain point in the night. It's a little bit ridiculous, but that's how it happens. So after a certain amount of shots in, Ben will turn his hat backwards and become Stephen Douglas, which is essentially an alternate personality who is one of the most entertaining people on the planet. And that's how Ben gets invited. And it's fucking amazing. I don't have that. I don't have that personality. I'm not able to just turn that on and be that person. So I used wine a little bit to get in public games, but really somebody like me who should be beating the games is going to have to sell a percentage of their action to the game runners. And that's the other way you get in, is that once you've established that you're a consistent winner in the game, the guys who are running the game will take a mandatory 25-30% piece of your action in order for you to get a seat. And if you're out there listening and you consider yourself a poker professional, not a recreational, really anybody, but if you consider yourself a poker pro or poker professional, when you're getting invited to a poker game, you need to first stop and ask yourself why. Because usually somebody's not trying to give away their friend's money to you as a courtesy, right? You're either being invited because they think you're a loser, or you're being invited for another reason. And if it's for another reason, you really need to figure out what that is.
What are you alluding to? If there is no logical other reason?
Well, you're probably a loser in the game, and they probably think you're a loser in the game. And either that's because the poker's straight up and everybody else there is better than you think, or there's something else going on, which in private games is very likely to be the case. So I have now established a rule. Once I started playing in these games and beating these games, and that word sort of got out, and it was a little bit harder for me to get invited, I actually realized that being asked to give up a piece to the game runner, at first I thought this was a pain. I was naive and think, oh no, I'm making less than I could be. I would much rather have all of myself in these spots that I'm clearly winning. I've now realized it's exactly the opposite. I won't play in a private game unless the game runner's asked to buy a piece of me, because to me that establishes the legitimacy of the game. And I would offer that advice to anybody who is a poker professional trying to play in private games. You should be in a spot where the guys running the games want your action. Otherwise, you really should question why you're there.
Yeah, the incentives don't line up, right? Like if the incentives don't make sense, you need to start questioning the incentives. And what you were saying about Ben, that's the dream, right? Like what happens when you go to a game and then you're not there the next week, right? You want the recreational players to ask, where did he go? Where is he? Right. I really like playing with him, right? Like that's the persona that you want to project, as a professional, because as silly as it can sound, half of your job as a professional is to be entertainment for the people who are just messing around and playing poker as a hobby for fun.
Right. It's great if you're a soul crusher, right? And you go there and you dominate the game and you have a great session. But if you're never getting back, what's that really worth? I would always rather be the guy who's winning a little bit less and gets to play in that game consistently.
Yeah.
That is absolutely where you want to be. And we've seen a couple guys over the years who have just epitomized it. You have like the Andrew Robles, right? Who have set up the games that he now gets any businessman to come play in. You have Phil Hellmuth is I know he gets bashed a lot, but he's done this amazing. He doesn't have to play in any public cash games ever. People enjoy the ability to lose money to him, which is a crazy thing to think about. But people are actively willing to lose money for the opportunity to play with him.
And I think the opposite is true too. Like people want to beat him as well. Like it's almost like a
They do. I mean, I don't know if they really think a lot of these businessmen truly think they're going to beat him, but they want to take their shots.
They want to see the poker brat, right? Like they want to be yelled at, which is a really funny thing to want, but like they want that, like a badge of honor.
Yep. And you see that more, some of the private games gotten in, and specifically like one of the online private games that I was in over the summer during COVID, like my COVID PLO private group had a number of professional athletes and ex-athletes in it. And you see that a lot with those guys where they just want to compete. This is for them. It really is more about beating the professionals, not necessarily, Phil because of his attitude, but just beating poker pros from a competitive standpoint. And those guys are a lot of fun to play with because they just don't stop. Like their competitive drive is crazy. And if you're getting the best of them, they want to try to figure out why and beat you as badly as possible next time.
Tell me about Rake, right? Like in these private games, like, so my experience in private games,
more Rake is better, right?
Yeah. In LA, more Rake is better, right? Like some of them are like 5% uncapped. And so the benefits need to be very, very high to not play at a casino and go somewhere else where poker is legalized and regulated, I would think.
Yeah, the games have to be incredibly soft to beat some of the rakes. So the most common rake that I'm familiar with in these games is the either 5,100 or 100, 200 games where they're usually taking two big blinds out of the pot, which is insane. I mean, in a 5,100 game, you're taking $200 out of basically every pot that gets above, I think it's like 5 or 6 big blinds. I mean, it really is like if you just have a raise and a call, you're pretty much scooping 20% out of that pot post flop. But the games are good enough that they're beatable at those stakes. Now there are clearly private games out there where this is not the case, and the only winners in these games are the house in the long run, where these guys are taking 5% uncapped. They are taking 2 big blinds in games that are not that beatable, that they advertise as beatable, but the reality is they aren't. And the house is just winning fortunes while everybody in the game, or maybe everybody but 1 or 2 people, is losing in the long run. And it's something you just have to be aware of and try to figure out the skill level of the other players in the games to decide if the game you're in is beatable or not.
Yeah, and it's like 2 big blinds a pot is actually beatable. Like even at online, like you play 200 no limit, right?
Yeah, because of the cap.
Yeah, so they're taking $4 a hand, but it's still beatable, right? So like, it scales, right? But when you start taking 5% uncapped, like everyone loses. Your game is not sustainable.
The uncapped stuff is nuts. And I dabbled in the GG high stakes streets while it was uncapped and thought it was insane and quit very quickly. I've gotten back in there since they capped it and redone their rake structure. But yeah, what you're saying is exactly right. I mean, the uncapped rake, I think, unless you just have people completely punting, is absolutely unbeatable.
Yeah, I got into a pot. It was like a 10K buy-in against Freddie Deeb, and like in a private game in LA, we both get it in pre, and we both have aces, right? So like the dealer runs it out, they stack our chips up. It's like early on.
There's no way this is gonna end with they raked it.
Yeah, we get our chip stack back, and it's like 9,200. Like me and Freddie are like, what the fuck just happened? Like we played a 20K pot, you took 1,600. Like it's that's sort of
oh my God, that to me is I have not run into that. That is unreal.
Yeah, it's crazy, man.
To take an uncapped rate and a chop, I mean, that is fucking unreal. And there's nothing you can do about it, right? Like you're already there by taking the seat. You've agreed to there's literally nothing you can do about it at that time, but leave and forfeit the money they just raked from you.
Oh, they give it back, actually. Freddie like catered the event. I guess he has like some sort of food business or whatever.
Oh,
like
okay.
he raised hell about them taking the cut. And it's just like, man, in these games like that are not regulated by the casino, like you have to pay attention to what's happening, because if you don't, you will get just torched. It's just impossible to win.
I would challenge anybody to beat a game like that. That seems absolutely ridiculous. But I mean, there are absurd win rates in these private games, and it's why people play them, right? And it's why people can get away with charging crazy rake. It's why people can get away with making you sell a piece, is because the win rates that you see in some of these private games are never going to be replicable in a casino in a public online format. I mean, they're just, you get players who don't play poker playing at stakes that you dream about playing with people like that at.
Yeah. And I think like one of the 5% uncapped games was like a 5-10 PLO with Gilbert Arenas, who ended up dropping like 60K and was like potting every hand, pre-flop on the pot, or pre-flop on the flop, on the turn, on the river, in the dark. Like just every hand, like sweating his cards face up at showdown. Like,
yep, that's a great spot to be in when cards are going your way. We had so in Ivy's room over the summer, there's been a big mixed game going. I'm not a very good mixed game player, but I will dabble on occasion. I learned a little bit last year, tried to learn a little bit more this year, but the game's so soft that I can't help myself sometimes. And one of the people in that game is Brandon Cantu. And Brandon Cantu sounds like I do, with a perspective on sort of risk to ruin and bankroll management times 20. I mean, he will have not only his last dollar, but the last dollar of anybody around him on the table, and not on the poker table, on the roulette table. He is crazy. It is unbelievable to watch. The guy.
How does somebody like that survive?
Backers and having huge winning poker sessions and great games sometimes to sustain him. So this was one of those nights where he had played 36 hours straight at this point. This is a 300-600 mix game, and he was up around 300,000 in the game, which is an absurd amount to be at. He had just scooped the table for a day and a half straight. We got to the point of the night. Now he was really coming down from probably Adderall or something like that, and was getting tired and wanted to stop playing the mix. And we couldn't really say no because the game was running around him at this point. And he wanted to just play Big O. And we were playing 8K Cat Big O, 100, 200, 8K Cat Big O. And he was straddling to 1,000 from every single position on every single hand. And those are the spots where you just look around and it's like, well, I could very easily lose 60,000 in the next 30 minutes, or I could very easily win 100. And I know it's probably a 65-35, and I don't have a choice but to sit down, buckle up, and see what happens. And those are the spots that you're just not going to ever get in a public game, right? You're like, good luck going and finding somebody who's going to be in your game and is going to straddle to 1,000 blind in every position. And you have these opportunities to just have insane win rates. You know there's a huge variance risk, and you know you might lose, but those spots just don't come up outside of these sort of situations.
Yeah, I mean, they could happen in a public game, but one of the private game players is going to drag that guy over to his private game pretty quickly, right?
Seems a lot less likely. You hear about it a lot more in a private game than you do a public game, especially for any sort of good stake. Sometimes you'll hear about guys going crazy at like the 1-2 or the 2-5 games, but yeah.
Tell me, you played in some of the big JRB games this summer. Tell me about that. Tell me some fun stories.
That was an experience. So I met, there's a gentleman who anybody in these big, either online or Vegas games knows by the name of Crazy Mike. He's considered Crazy Mike. He's called the Dictator. He has a plaque in Bobby's room that they bring him when he's in the game that says Crazy Mike on it. He is the self-proclaimed reason that the Bellagio still has Pana water. When the waitresses bring him drinks, they have to call him Crazy Mike. And now, to be fair, he's a very nice guy and tips. Well, like, he's not harassing them or anything. It's just this very funny dynamic that he has going on. He runs a mixed game with JRB. Either in Ivy's room or in Bobby's room. I had played with Crazy Mike in some of the private mixed games online, but I hadn't met him in person yet. One of my friends was in that mixed game. I had just had a big win at Aria, and I think one of the PLO games, and was walking over to talk to my friend in the Bobby's room mixed game. I sat down, I was talking to my friend. Mike wants to know who I am. We go through his normal discussion of, you're going to call me Crazy Mike when you address me. I go, you're what? We've played. What are you talking about? He goes, don't say another. I'm Crazy Mike. When you walk in the room, you say, hi, Crazy Mike. That's the first thing you do every time. So, we went through the normal Crazy Mike shenanigans, but then after that, we started really talking, and turns out we had a lot in common, some similar upbringing stuff, became good friends with him. He said, next time we play this, why take a seat? I go, I don't really play mix. He goes, no, it's fine. We'll sell some. Yeah, we want you in the game. So I said, okay, I'll consider it. And JRB, who was in the game and who was losing at that point, then wanted to start talking to me about potentially joining the next game because he's like, oh, we got this fish on the line. So I started talking to JRB a bit. We ended up talking about wine. I talked to him once or twice before. I don't think he even remembered who I was, but we had talked once or twice before about wine, and he remembered halfway through that conversation, I think, that we'd had previous wine conversations. So it transitions from Mike sort of inviting me to the game, me sounding semi-interested. JRB thinks, oh, we've got this fish, let's get him in the game. Start talking to JRB, and by the end of the night, we're just chatting about wine, food, travel, et cetera, to the point that he goes, where do you live? Oh, Veer, I'm at Mandarin. I'll drive you home. I go, we're at Bellagio. I go, no, I'll just walk the 6 minutes home. It's fine. He goes, no, I'm giving you a ride. We walk outside the back VIP entrance of Bellagio, and he has his Rolls Royce SUV pulled up on the curb with his driver just waiting. We get in the back of that, and he gives me the 3 minutes. So anytime you want to get in the game, like, here's my number. We'll always make it. Clearly, he's been told that I'm a super mixed fish, and he get in the game. He goes, well, I think the game's a little big. He goes, don't worry about, I'll arrange for you selling 40%. So for you, it can be a 200, 400 game and blah. Gives me the whole sales pitch in the back of the whatever $500,000 SUV with his drive. I felt way too cool to say no. It completely worked. Bought the sales pitch, hook, line, and sinker, and started playing in that game. The characters that go through there are amazing. One of my favorite nights in that game was in the middle of the Dan Bilzerian JRB private game drama, where Dan Bilzerian had publicly accused JRB of setting him up in a rigged game. And obviously, Dan Bilzerian has one of the biggest social media followings in the world, and JRB is a poker professional. So one of the biggest social media followings in the world being publicly accusing you of cheating at your profession is not going to go over well. And we had a game that night, and JRB was in the game, and the drama back and forth with the calls and texts to Bill Perkins, the advice that he was getting from the other guys at the table. I think Helmu stopped by to try to calm him down a bit. Crazy Mike was trying to calm him down. One of the big other mixed game players, goes by Bear, was in the game, trying to give him, settle him down. JRB was absolutely flying off the walls.
What's the threat here, right? That JRB doesn't get to invite people, he loses his reputation.
Not only that, but the potential that people who have previously lost money in his games now think they've been cheated.
Yeah.
You imagine that, right? What if you're a businessman, know nothing really about poker, play for fun, have been invited to a JRB game, lost a couple $1 million. Months later, a year later, you hear Dan Bilzerian going on about how he was set up in a similar game and cheated. Your first thought is going to be, was I cheated in this game? So it's just opening this massive can of worms. And it was clear from the way JRB was talking, going about this, and the messages and texts he had. Now, of course, he could be a good actor, he's a poker player, but it seemed very clear that this did not happen. So the chance of JRB setting up Dan Bilzerian to lose a couple $100,000 and risk his entire reputation in a game that JRB, I don't even think was participating in, he had just arranged or had only participated in for half the night, is slim to none. What really happened was Dan took a bad beat, got frustrated, had a bad conversation with somebody, was drunk, and just, read the entire situation wrong. So the battle for JRB to get Dan to try to issue a public retraction was just a sight to see over the course of that night, with the different poker players weighing in, different calls he had to make, the drama, the wine, being drunk to try to calm him down. The whole cumulative thing was ridiculous. It was fun to be a fly on the wall for that one, for sure.
I would say too, like, it's also feels a little dangerous too, right? Like, it feels a little dangerous for JRB for word to get out that maybe he's running a rigged game and some people have lost a few $1 million. Like, I personally wouldn't feel comfortable with some of these folks thinking that I had scammed
Yeah,
in.
you're even talking physical safety, right?
Yeah, exactly. Physical safety.
Yeah,
like, you're at risk. Like, it's a threat. People don't like losing millions of bucks.
To that extent, yeah.
Yeah, people don't like losing millions of dollars. Did Dan ever publicly apologize or retract?
No. So they had one of the weirder conversations through Bill Perkins that I've heard in a long time later in that week, and that was still going on while we were in the game.
How is it working? Like, is Bill Perkins in the game? Is Bilzerian in the game? Is JRB? Like, how does the communication line?
I guess Bill was in the game that JRB was that Dan was saying JRB cheated him in, which is why he's involved in this. Both of them are much closer to Bill than they are to each other. So Bill was sort of this intermediary for a lot of these conversations. And JRB was too pissed to really talk to Dan directly because it was just a bunch of fuck you motherfuckers. And Dan was sort of the same thing, just like, if you see that JRB, I think, publicly posted some of the text exchange. It was basically Dan going, "You're a fat piece of shit, scumbag," and JRB going, "Fuck you, motherfucker. You know I'd never do this." And that was basically the extent of their conversations to each other. So the middleman was Bill in this, try to mediate some sort of decent conversation. And I think the way it ended was, and they hired MJ Gonzalez, Matthew Gonzalez, who's now the guy who good friend of mine from those games. He's, I think, come out public. I think, man, I'm gonna say this anyway. I'm pretty sure I'm allowed to say this publicly. If I'm not, I'm gonna get some very angry calls. No, I'm pretty sure this is no now. MJ is Daniel's coach for the Daniel Negreanu Doug Polk heads up match. It's that MJ Gonzalez, who is one of the coaches and part of Daniel's team, private game crusher for a very long time. He's very close with Perkins and was involved in one of these private games as well. So he was hired as like a third-party investigator to talk to everybody there, see if there was cheating going on. So he came back with his findings that said there was no cheating. He was hired because he's so trustworthy and has one of the best poker reputations possible. So they hired him. He came back and said, "I haven't found anything." This was relayed to Dan. Dan was basically like, "Yeah, whatever." Told Bill, he's like, "Okay, fine. JRB probably didn't cheat." JRB is like, "What the fuck, dude? You have to come publicly say this to all of your followers that now you put me on blast with." And Dan, being Dan, was like, "Nah, this is behind me. I'll see you later." And that, I think, is pretty much how it ended. Was like Dan going, "Okay, I probably didn't get cheated based on the guy that, like, the investigation of the guy, my own guy, want to hire, and the guys I've talked to since that. But I don't care anymore. See you guys later."
Oof, that's a wrap. There are not much you can really do.
Brutal. I mean, I don't think anything too negative came of it to JRB. Fortunately, I don't think Dan has, the best reputation himself, so his word wasn't exactly taken as law.
Well, yeah, when you get drunk and publicly accuse somebody of cheating and then get found out by a third party that it's not actually going down that way and you don't retract it, I would say that there are some decisions you've made in your life that have maybe been subpar leading up to that moment.
Yeah, but on the other hand, it's kind of, if you're in Dan Bilzerian's shoes, the way you've constructed your business, his controversy is almost in all cases a positive, right? You just want clicks and eyeballs. So he was really just free rolling this. It's like, if it turns out I'm wrong, or JRB, too bad for him. If it turns out I'm right, awesome. And that was basically his approach to this. The only person who really got hurt was JRB.
Yeah. And I guess he's driving around in a $500K Rolls Royce. So hard to shed too many tears for JRB at the end of the day. Yeah.
Although he had a tough, I don't think I'm spoiling this. I don't know when this is going to be released, but he had a very tough comeback to high stakes poker as well. That was, we had a nightly mix game session the day after they filmed one of the high stakes poker episodes. And it was very obvious how he did in his session.
I haven't seen any of those. Have they even been released yet? The high stakes poker episodes?
Yeah, they've been coming out since December. So that's why I think I'm okay to talk about it.
Jason, tell me about presence. Why did you think presence was the missing weapon in the arsenal of poker players?
So everyone's a mindset champion when they're running great, right? But when you're getting crushed day after day and you haven't booked a win in forever and the confidence just gone, and you're trying to do this thing that you read about in a book or someone told you about, being logical and being happy that the money went in good when all you really want to do is cry and hit something at the same time, like, how are you supposed to be logical in that moment? But that's the only moment when you really need it. What you need in that moment isn't mindset. You've already read all the mindset books and you already know what you're supposed to think and what you're supposed to do. What you actually need in that moment is presence. Presence is the ability to connect the dots between who you want to be and how you can actually be that person when you need it most.
So let's cut to the chase, right? Like, how do you do it? How do you stay more present when you're at the poker table?
Well, you get there by first deciding that you want more, right? That you want to grow your intuition, that you want to create more flow in your life, and that you want to reach your full potential as a player and as a person. And once you get there, you can start trying out some of the exercises and practices that I've put together. If it feels good, if you're enjoying it, you can keep going, right? And if you keep going long enough, eventually you'll find that you're just playing at really high levels, that you feel good with low stress, and you're enjoying your experience a lot more. Not just at the table, but away from it as well.
I personally would love to have as much presence as I possibly can in my day-to-day life. And if you, the listener, right now wants to add some presence to your game, visit pokerwithpresence.com, join Jason Su's email newsletter, and then schedule a free consult with the master of presence himself. One more time, that's pokerwithpresence.com.
Speaking of insane win rates, going back to that, so I went through a 5,000 hand stretch, which is nothing insane, but it's decent, on one of the private apps. And this was in a 5-10 mandatory $20 straddle that I won 187 big blinds per 100 hands over 5,000 hands. And I, unfortunately, after that stretch, it's a little harder to bring good wine and act like a really fun person to play with on COVID games. Like you don't get a lot of credit for that, which was one of the main things that I was using to get me into these games. So after that stretch, I was not participating in that group anymore.
Yeah, that's like you need to have one hell of a fucking personality. It's like that scene in Pulp Fiction, right? About the pig. Like that pig better have a hell of a personality to be able to pull that off.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't. So there we go. There was no hat backwards Stephen Douglas moment for me. It was just we probably don't think you're a fit for this group.
Yeah, 187 BBs per 100. That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Playing 300 big blinds deep, so that's one of the factors. And every hand is straddled, and pretty much every hand is opened. So that's how that happens. It sounds like a surreal number, but yeah, there were some points where I had one of the athletes in the game on significant tilt from playing him, and after the game broke, he decided to sit and play heads up with me for a while after that. And there were just a couple spots like that in this 5,000 hand stretch that were just some unbelievably favorable spots, playing 300 big blinds deep against guys who certainly shouldn't be.
Yeah, I found myself in one spot on a private app one time where it was three-handed, and I realized that like the two other people were the same person, but they were both horrible at poker. And so like just kind of discerning the incentives of both of them and like what he's trying to accomplish. Like
that's ridiculous.
It was a really good night, and I did not get invited back.
That is unreal. So you had a night where you consciously knew that you were playing the same person multi-accounting, and they were bad enough that you made a decision, this is still worth it to keep playing, and you beat them.
Correct. Yes.
That's amazing. That's actually fantastic.
They were the incentives were just so aligned. It was like so obvious what they were trying to do that it was like, oh, cool. Like I'm just going to exploit the living bejesus out of this because they don't know that I know,
That is truly amazing. I wish the people multi-accounting at the 100, 200, 200, 400 no rat hole games on ACR were that bad. Unfortunately, they are not, and those guys put in some fucking work. But your spot sounds a lot better.
It was better, but then I got disinvited. I got thrown out of the club directly after that.
Yeah, if you're beating the same guy twice at the same time, I think your goodwill is going to be used up at least twice as fast.
Yes, I'm pretty sure he was the guy running the whole thing as well. So he was on significant tilt and not very happy about the situation.
Yeah, that's. At least you got what you could out of him.
I did. I destroyed that sheep. I did not shear it multiple times.
That really is funny. Can you imagine the ego blow of somebody trying to run poker, multi-accounting you and just still getting beat? It's like, oh man, that's
not just that, the tilt. Like he had to be so fucking livid on both of his iPads at the same time.
Picturing that is great. I just now whenever I picture any poker player on his iPad on tilt, I just get the Daniel Negreanu like "fuck you, cocksucker." Thing. I just picture this guy doing this on two separate iPads, like one iPad, one laptop. That's amazing.
What is the cocksucker motherfucker thing about anyway? Like why that?
Who knows? You'd have to ask Dean Eggs that. I have no idea.
I'm curious.
Have you followed that at all? Or are you one of the guys who's gotten involved in that? I know the commentary, but I mean, like on a day to day, are you betting on it now? Are you tracking the results?
I've watched 2 sessions and I've commentated both.
Okay.
Yep.
So when we did commentary, I had no side action, but at this point, I have gotten in. I got in with Kevin Rabishow, who you would never want to have heads up action with in anything. But in this case, he was hedging off of his Doug Polk bets. So I was able to get a pretty decent line, I thought, for the second half of the session. So I do have a little bit on Doug to win half number 2, although I think I'm off to a bad start there.
Yeah, I would say that like taking action from Kevin Rabichow in a heads-up duel is another one of those things that's like, what's going on here? What is happening?
Yeah, I
right
would
here?
expect him to have the best of it in almost all sides at all times. He just seems like one of those guys who is rarely to never in a losing position.
Yes, I like Kevin Rabichow. He's a killer. My associate coach, I pray that Kevin Rabichow never starts his own training platform because my associate coach would leave me in a heartbeat to join.
Oh, I didn't know he was your associate coach. I was just blindly plugging him.
No, not Rabichow. My coach Thomas is my associate coach, and he's got such a man crush on Kevin Rabichow that he would abandon me instantly if he ever started his own training platform.
It's a well-deserved man crush, though. I'm assuming that Run It Once takes care of him well enough that he won't be leaving anytime soon because but who knows?
Thank God.
I mean, if there's anybody who could go open up his own Heads Up No Limit content and get Snap followers, it would be him for sure.
Yeah, if Run It Once was to torpedo my operation, just release Kevin Rabichow and I'm done. Like you
know what? I think the Galfond Corneth challenge is going to be wrapping up for the day in an hour. I'll have to let Phil know.
There you go. Yeah, just let him know.
So Brad said that if you ever want to just shut him down, just let K-Rap go. I'm sure that's high on Phil's priority list to torpedo Brad Wilson by letting go one of the best no limit heads up players in the world.
Yeah, it's top of the list for Phil. I'm sure he's considering every angle,
especially by someone who's considered the absolute nicest guy. But who was I talking to? We're talking to somebody the other day about how unfair the concept of Phil Galfond has gotten. I don't know if you followed much of his challenges. The poker world, I know, has followed it loosely. Most people are not tuning into the Galfond Corneth match at all. But that guy has everything. I mean, has lived the life and has literally everything. And you can't hold it against him because he's such a nice guy and has earned it all.
Yeah, you actively root for Galfond. I mean, I got him as a guest on the show because I think I called him the most selfish man in poker in like a blog post, right? But my rationale was like, we need you, Phil. We need Run It Once. Like Run It Once poker is the hope of poker platforms worldwide. Like sell this shit, promote this shit, tell everybody why it's better than everything else, right? Because we don't deserve ACR, but we have to live with ACR. Like let's grow Run It Once to the biggest platform in the universe.
I didn't realize we were so on the same page about you. I ran and still am a staking platform for Run It Once specifically for that reason. I put together and was running Run It Once staking, which is for new players who don't have a Run It Once account, who want to try it from PokerStars or from Party Poker or anything like that. We were offering a staking program on Run It Once to try to convert people and show them just how much better it is. Because I think you're 100% right. I think that is what the future of online poker should be and should look like. And the way he's doing it is the right way to do it.
Yeah, very few people do I believe in, like I believe in Phil Galfond and his integrity and his willingness to try different things, be innovative, and sort of just grow poker as a whole.
His integrity is absurd. So when he first announced the Galfond challenges, I, being an egotistical maniac who had a lot of success in PLO recently, texted him about it as a feeler. Just say, hey, I saw you doing this. What odds would you think of? All he does is respond and he goes, I consider you a friend. I wouldn't want to take your money like that. That was the end of the conversation. That was it. that was it. It was just like, come on, man. You're not even in the ballpark here. This would not be a real challenge. I would feel too guilty just destroying you in this way. I was like, all right.
It's like the nicest way to destroy somebody that it is on the planet. Like, sorry, man, you're a good friend. I just don't want to ruin your whole entire existence like that.
Right. But he's right. I mean, he's just completely right. He could have, other people in poker, I think, in a spot as favored as he would have been in, would have tried to do the opposite, would have tried to sort of like sweet talk me into it, right? Been like, oh, your game's come a long ways. I might be willing to give you 3, maybe 3.5 to 1, something like that. He's just the exact opposite. He's like, I'd feel too bad doing this. I'm sorry. No.
And to be fair, like when it comes to sustainability, right? We talked about those super high uncapped rate games in California and those kind of places. Like those games just die and the churn is massive. People don't regularly play in those games because they just take way too much off the table, right? So like it's low integrity, but when you have higher integrity, you create a more sustainable brand, a more sustainable system. I mean, like JRB, right? It has to be higher integrity than 5% uncapped. If he's running 5% uncapped, he's not able to do it for any sustained period of time ever.
Definitely.
We probably ought to get to some more questions though in this conversation. But yeah, like there's always benefits to having high integrity in the poker world and not just taking as much as you can on one day, like treating people well, acting with honor. And to be honest, like most of the high stakes pros that persist and last do have high integrity, and that's why they're able to persist and last.
Yeah, I mean, poker players just need to not be so short-sighted. It's not about maximizing your EV in every single hand in every single game that you're always in. Long-term EV is usually the way to go, and you might need to sacrifice something up front for that.
Yeah, you got to give a little. Like you have to give a little. You've got to be willing to give some.
The easiest and most obvious example to that is when poker pros have to drink in private games. Like, obviously, you're not going to play as great when you're drunk. You're going to be sacrificing some EV, but in the long term, that's what's going to get you invited back is fitting in and sort of going with the flow in these games.
I mean, it's you can sacrifice short-term EV for long-term EV. Like that's the give and take of the situation.
Could and should in most cases.
Right. What would you say is the most unexpected thing that's come from your poker journey?
Unexpected. That's a really good question. I don't think I've been asked that before. I might need a second to think about it. I think networking, actually. I was somebody who I thought had a very good network going into poker from the real estate side of it, and had prided myself getting into real estate at such a young age, had been a very good networker and had been able to build relationships. I am shocked at how valuable networking and the relationships you can build in poker are from these games. You will get guys that I would never expect to see show up at games, and guys who are, restaurateurs or DJs or people that you just don't realize could be from any form of life and passionate about poker and want to play in these games. And the networking doors that these things open are incredible. Both from, I've had food relationships, wine doors open, cannabis doors open, real estate doors open, almost anything. One of the guys I was recommended from a game that I played in who needed coaching recently. I got recommended this guy's coach. I was just told, he plays in private games in Singapore. He plays in some high stakes private PLO games there and needed a high stakes private PLO coach, was recommended to do it. On the call with him, went over it. We started chatting a little bit afterwards, and he runs a private jet service. That's what he does, is he charters private planes to clients. I mean, what a relationship to now have. It's been really surprising, fun, and cool to meet all the various different types of people through poker as the conduit.
And it goes back to like being cool, right? Being a fun person to be around, and treating people with respect. Like people that want to play for hundreds of thousands of dollars, guess what? If they're not professional poker players, they are very, very successful in whatever endeavor it is that they're in this world. They're likely at the top of the food chain. And it's just amazing the resources that some of these guys, have and freely offer to people that they like.
Yep.
Not saying to like go in with that angle, right? It's just a side effect of being a.
You have to let that sort of stuff come to you. I don't think it would work if you went in trying to milk relationships and do that in the poker world. You have to just be yourself and let those relationships fall into place.
I would say that those guys have a pretty good brown nose radar, and that if that is your agenda, they're going to sniff it out really fucking quick.
Right. And it's the opposite of what they want in the games. You, as the poker player, are at that game for a specific reason, and it's to compete against those guys and give them a fun environment to compete against. They don't want to feel like they're at a business meeting or they're being used for anything. So I think you're completely right. They probably have a very good BS detector, and that would never work.
And I can say from firsthand experience, right? Like playing against a pop star, like the people that were weird, you can tell when people are weird, when the vibe is off, right? Like I think a lot of these guys just want to be a dude playing cards with a bunch of buddies, drinking and having fun.
Guys' night out, 100%.
They want you to talk shit to them. Like they want to make jokes. They want to laugh. They want to feel the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat, right? And just be with the boys.
Most of them. Now I do have, if we have time, I have a counter story to that.
Yeah.
So I have gotten the only poker fight I've ever gotten in my life, shockingly, happened at one of the most relaxed high stakes games I've ever been in. And it stemmed from this guy. I was buried in a game. I was down like 75,000 in a 25K cap game, making it even harder to get out. And I made a bet with a guy that I got laid 2-1 that I would be profitable by the end of the night. And so that we couldn't play, I couldn't just, find somebody heads up to play all night. We said I had to be profitable by, I think it was 4 a.m. It was probably around midnight at the time that we made the bet. I said, I'll be profitable by 4 a.m.
And wait, you had to be profitable. Could you leave once you crossed the finish line? Did you just win the bet automatically, even if you gave some back?
The idea was that I couldn't just leave instantly. I had to play as long as the game was still well and going. If the game was going, I'm not supposed to sit out, but obviously it's going to affect my play a little bit.
Yeah.
I got well up in the game. Well, before that, the game breaks around 3:30 in the morning. The game just ends up dying. I'm probably up 30 or 40 at the time, comfortably up. The game breaks and dies. Texting the next day to settle up. He goes, "Oh, you didn't play till 4." And I go, "What? That's not why we had the 4 a.m. rule." And the 4 a.m. rule was in there so that I couldn't play infinitely to get out of the hole and win the bet. The game broke before 4. Like, you're joking, right? And he goes, "No, we made a bet that you had to play until 4." Like, there was no game. What do you mean? That makes absolutely no sense. That's not in the spirit of what bet we made. And he just ended up taking the stance that he's more important to the game than I am. He's a big fish, and he's right. He is more important to the game than I am, has better friends, and was just not going to pay me. He ended up sort of goading me on for the next couple months about, "Oh, you got so close to winning that bet, blah," just rubbing in my face continually and being a complete asshole about it, knowing very well that he was screwing me out of the bet we made. And if I had lost, I certainly would have had to pay him. So we get to a night, one of the games where he comes into the game late. We've already been playing for hours. It's 1 or 2 in the morning. He comes in to replace somebody. He's pretty drunk, sits down right next to me, and immediately just starts being a douchebag, talking a bunch of shit, blah, blah. We get into a big pot, and he massively slow rolls me at the end. I get in. I think we get all in on the turn. I believe I have the nut straight at the time, and there's a flush draw on board. The flush comes in. I showed my cards when we got all in. He was holding his cards, right? So my cards have been laying on the table for a while. I still have the nut straight. The flush comes in, and he takes a solid 2 minutes because he's drunk and is really playing up the drunk thing. And then eventually just starts laughing. Goes, I have the flush. Just turn to him, punch him in the face. Probably not the best thing to do as the poker player being invited in a private game. And this is something that everybody in that game will always remember. But yeah, I just didn't wait. The second he turned over his hand after 2 minutes, he was standing up and next to me. I just stood up right next to him and just leveled it. My biggest mistake in that moment wasn't about thinking how important it is to get invited to the game, but one of his best friends is an ex-Israeli National Guardman. Okay? And I'm sure that's the closest I've ever been to death, because Tomer was over the table and had me before I even knew what was happening, and has told me afterwards the absolute only reason that he didn't just lay me on the spot, just take me out, was that he really considers me a friend and we've gotten along so well in the past, and that I've given him incredible action in the past when he needed it and he was having bad nights. So there's been times that I've played with Tomer in the past where he was buried and I've given him all the flip action he wanted and just really play with him. And he said that literally may have saved your life right here, because otherwise you were done. You laid a hand on him at the table. You were just finished.
Holy shit.
And instead I was allowed to walk away. We cooled down, sort of apologized after, and, just put that episode behind us. That was basically my payment for him not paying me, was what everybody sort of decided. That was what was mediated in the end. It was like, you were a douchebag to him. He punched you in the face. Let's move on now. And that's what happened.
That is a terrifying story.
Yeah, he was Tomer's a scary dude to see coming at you over a table right after you've punched one of his friends.
Yeah, I can believe that. Yeah. Whew. Yeah, I guess the moral of the story is I don't know what the moral is. Is there a moral of the story?
If you're going to be an idiot and use violence at a part, which, you know, I've told the story once before, and people were like, wow, you're an asshole. You punched somebody over a slow roll. It's like, you know what? Fuck it. That guy deserved it. And I stand by that. He absolutely deserved it. But
I'm with you.
If you're going to do something like that, make sure you're on good terms with everybody else in the room.
Yeah. I'm going to go on a limb and say that, like, you probably weren't thinking about anything in that moment other than I'm going to fucking deck this dude.
100%. I was so tired of that guy's bullshit at that point that I did not care about anything else. It was just completely reactional. He turned over the slow roll and I fucking punched him.
Well, it's a great story. You punched the douchebag in the face, and then you almost paid with your life, and then the debt got settled. So
it gets brought up a lot. I get reminded of this by the guys. Some guys bring it up as one of the funniest things they've ever seen in their life at these games, and some guys bring it up as, man, you are an idiot. Like, do you remember when you were this fucking stupid? You're invited to some of the best private games and you punched one of the whales.
I think it was deserved, and either way.
Deserved.
It's a great story for decades to come, right? Like, it's just a great story.
It was the guy. I'm telling this guy. It's more than not paying. Not paying alone, I could argue, is deserve it. It was the attitude of like, I'm more important to the games and I know it, so I'm just going to screw you over.
Oh, he was needling you for sure, right? It was like,
sure.
I have all this power and all this influence, and I'm going to do whatever the fuck I want, and you just have to take it.
That's what it was, and I took it for as long as I could take it, and then at the end, I got tired of it.
And then at the end, you decked him.
Yep. Oh, wait. One thing I was going to say about that was one of the more satisfying moments of that night. So I was immediately escorted out, right? After Tomer grabbed me, things calmed down for a second. I was escorted out, drove away, and then they told me I needed to come back and apologize if I ever want a chance of getting in the game again. I was very reluctant at first. I said, no, this guy's a douchebag. He deserved to be punched in the face. Eventually realized for the greater good of playing that I should probably come do that. So I come back to apologize. And I do have to say one of the more satisfying things is him sitting outside, clearly still in pain 20 minutes later with an ice pack up to his face and walking in the room. That was like, you know what, at least if I was going to do it, make it worth it a little bit.
Yeah. It hurt.
Right. At least if I'm going to do it, I'm going to get a good shot in.
Do you guys play against each other now? Do you ever laugh about it? Is there any?
No, we do not. It is not one of those things where it's like, oh, haha, remember what happened? No, not at all. This fucker screwed me out of 30,000 and I punched him in the face for slow rolling me.
Yeah. I guess seeing that personality type that's just going to needle you and, you know, keep picking at the nerve over and over and over again. Right. It's probably not going to laugh about it a few months later.
Not somebody I'd want to laugh about it with.
Yeah, true. When you think about joy in your career playing cards, what's the first memory that comes to mind?
The WSOP win, for sure. Not just the relief from winning it and the happiness from that, but then there was a bunch of the Run It Up Reno guys who were on the rail. A couple of my good friends from like my personal life and here in Vegas were on the rail who I got to celebrate that with afterwards. That was really a special moment. As somebody who's grown up listening to WSOP streams my whole life. I mean, I remember laying in bed, you know, throughout the entire, for these streams that would go on the entire night. And just watching to their conclusion all the time. So be able to, for me, what was like accomplish a lifelong goal was really, really cool.
Awesome, man. Yeah. How did it feel to win? Right. Like from what I read, you were 3-handed and you just busted both of them out on the same hand.
I did. So I had a huge chip lead. I mean, the most famous hand, I don't even know if not an actual famous hand, but for me, the most famous hand that I have played was a hand 4-handed in that tournament against Chance Corneth, the hand that Daniel Negreanu tweeted about and has gotten some press. I was on Jennifer Shahadi's the Grid podcast and for that hand specifically, and that got a bit of a run after it happened because it was dramatic, and Chance and I had some back and forth at the table. So it was only, I think, 3 or 4 hands after he busted out. And I had a massive chip lead. I had about a 5-1 chip lead on both players. And yeah, opened, I believe the button just opened jams. They were short stack, small blind called. And I looked down at Jack 10 suited, which in short deck is, one of the best possible hands. It's only about 42% against, aces and runs very well against other combos. and called and won. And that was it. I managed to get them both in the exact same hand and just never even have to play heads up. It was very sudden. It was cool. I think on the video, I'm like standing off behind, by my rail waiting for it. And it was just very, very surreal for the next 48 hours or so. It was a lot of this feels sort of like a dream.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially coming from like where you had been at leading up into that tournament, right? You're getting your teeth just knocked in.
Huge relief.
Yeah.
Huge relief, huge happiness for sure.
That's another one that you needed.
It was not. Yeah. I mean, that one, at that point, I was still at the point where if this didn't work out, I would go back to real estate and hadn't missed too much. Probably would have been okay. Later in the summer and in some of the private game spots, it was a lot worse. If I had lost at that point, I had given up a lot to get there and would have a much harder time resetting. This one was more of like, I really don't want to go back to my job.
Yeah.
Look, I totally get it. You feel like being a lone wolf in your poker journey has hamstrung your ability to realize your full potential. So I'm about to give you a golden opportunity to plug into a supportive tribe that will be the poker family you've always wished you had. How much money would you give for 1 hour of interactive group coaching led by myself, Coach Thomas, and occasionally past guests of the Chasing Poker Greatness podcast? For now, and this will absolutely change at some point in the near future, the price of admission to the live Poker Power Hour is 100% free. All you've got to do to get your invite is head to chasingpokergreatness.com and hop on the VIP newsletter. No more excuses, no more procrastination. It's time to take action and put yourself in position to turn your poker dreams into reality. I hope to see that beautiful face of yours in just a couple of days.
So I have the opposite question for you. When you think of pain in your poker career, what's the first memory that comes to mind?
This one's much easier. I have this is always my bad beat story and one of the hardest moments that I have played. This was involved in the short deck PLO private games that I was playing in, and it should not have been playing in them. They just grew and grew and grew in size, and we were at a point where they were ludicrous. I think we were playing 60K cap at the time, short deck PLO, and just way outside of my bankroll in a game that has way too much variance. And I was already down on the night. I was having a very frustrating night, had lost much more than I should be losing in a game, was past my stop loss, and got it all in 100, a cap pot, 120K cap pot with probably another 5 in there. So there were about 125,000 in the middle, with the absolute fish in the game. And in short deck, flushes are the nuts. They beat full houses. And I had nut flush, and he was drawing to 1 out. He was drawing to a gutter ball straight flush, and he hit it for the 125,000. And I lost my shit. That's the only time that I've really as the result of card, not the other guy needling. Now I'm telling 2 I'm a douchebag stories in a row, but the other one was turning into, I was both furious, devastated, mad, sad, all of the emotions, ripped the deck throughout. I was fucked. I got our group kicked out of Ivy's room for the night, actually, after that hand.
So you ripped the deck.
Yeah, grabbed the deck, shredded the deck, threw it at Sovril because he was laughing. Yeah, I was not happy. That was really painful. That was actually a pot that at the time I was on a bit of a downswing, and it was mostly a variance. I had a number of hands, sort of not that bad, but a number of pretty unlucky hands, which will happen, of course, in any sample size. But when you're playing way above your bankroll, hurt even more. And that was one that it was just like the straw that broke the camel's back on the night. And not fun.
How long did it take you to recover?
I have not played short deck since that night. Short deck PLO.
So what about emotionally, right? Like when did you play poker next? Did you take a week off?
I think I took the rest of the week off, and I'm the kind of person who, when I get really tilted or frustrated at poker, I don't want to get back in the streets and play. I want to study. So whenever I'm on like a real tilt or downswing or something like that, I stop playing and I go spend a week in the lab, because to me, when I want to restart, it helps me emotionally and confidence wise to know that I'm a better player than when the downswing happened. So that's sort of how I get out of the funk, is by studying spots that I know I need work on, and then getting back at the action, knowing that I'm better than when I took the break.
Yeah, it's a great way to frame it. Great way to go about it. Confidence does matter. And you mentioned the lab. What does your process for improving your game look like?
Changed a lot over the years. I mean, when I was really learning it, I was just trying to grind sims as much as, but after I got a solid foundation, grind sims. Now it's gotten a little bit more advanced to the point that it's based around the type of games that I'm in. So a lot of it is running spots and visions, and then imparting my own. It's tough to get into. I don't know how much I should share. I'm not 100% sure how much I should share for some of the private game stuff that I do, but I would say a lot of solver work.
A lot of solver work, a lot of node
locking.
Node locking with specific tendencies, I would imagine.
At this point, it's a lot of solver work, much less general concepts and things like this. I try to break down very specific spots and dig into those and do some deep dives. So like the one last week that I was doing very specifically was under the gun or middle position open versus a button flat where both blinds fold, and then range interaction on paired boards when like button flats behind. So that, like, very, very specific niche spots, and just do deep dives into those to try to tighten up very specific parts of my game one at a time.
Yeah, that's a great process. I mean, poker's a complex game. It's hard. You can't bite it all off in one go, right? You've got to systematically attack and learn each situation in and of itself.
Yep. And I think, I mean, initially my entire poker consumption was run at once videos, which is one of the reasons that I give Phil infinite credit at all times. I mean, I literally think run at once poker made me into a profitable poker player by itself.
That is a great testimonial. And you mentioned Vision, which is a run at once product, right?
Run partnership. I actually, for anybody interested, I self-plug. I do have a Visions affiliate link, and it's probably on my Twitter, which is just Thallo Poker. If anybody's looking for it or interested in that, I offer a free coaching session with a purchase of Visions. But Visions is an efficient, simplified bunker solver. It takes pre-solved. It takes sims that have been pre-solved, plugged into a database, and then you can run them much, much, much faster. Now, you're limited in that you can't tweak the parameters, but it does give you fairly accurate, efficient outputs for a number of spots, and lets you train and run these spots in a much more efficient way than you would be able to in any other form.
And last I checked, about a month or two ago, you were begging to get up to 500 followers. And
thanks.
As of today, I think you've reached
like
534. So, you've come a long way.
I don't know exactly what it is, but I know we're over that because, and I'm going to tell you why. This is funny because I'm not somebody who tries. I fucking hate social media. So this is just a terrible part of the conversation for us to be in. The reason that I know it's more than that is because I lost a bunch of followers when I started tweeting a bunch of political stuff recently at all of the new, during the Senate confirmation hearings and things like that. That amused the crap out of me, is that I thought it was very funny that as a just completely irrelevant poker player, I still have people who hate my political opinions enough to like chain unfollow me the second I start sharing them.
Yeah, it must have been brutal. You probably lost like what, 8, 9 followers?
Hey man, that's like a significant percentage of my follower base. So the only reason my real name's not on my social media at all. I try to stay fully anonymous for as long as possible, but I did put together that Twitter account. The one, pinned tweet on there is specifically for that run at one staking platform that we do. I realized I had to have some sort of social media presence to be able to reach out to people and get that rolling. And that's mostly what that's used for.
Yeah, man, you got to have some touchstones somewhere as it relates to the world at large. But I try, it's just for my own personal health to not get involved in the political stuff, because it's just, I spiral downward and I get emotional and I get angry and I'm just like, what are you doing? Like, probably half of the people that you're even thinking of interacting with are fucking robots. Like, just leave the computer, drop everything and go somewhere else and be happy.
I gotta admit, I've enjoyed it. I've taken some weird twisted pleasure, probably because it's been going my way recently. But there really has been some twisted pleasure in responding to some of these people, and there shouldn't be. Like I hate myself for it a little bit, but there just has be the idiocy that you see online is mind blowing, and it probably makes me a worse person to respond to some of it, and I get all that, but there are some comments that I just can't help it, and especially like with the riots that happen. We're recording this on January 7th, so yesterday, January 6th, obviously is when we had a bunch of racist pieces of shit storm the Capitol building in our country. And yeah, I mean, seeing the reaction online and stuff, it's just, I can't help but respond. I'm going to try to be more disciplined in that, but it's been fun recently.
I could say that, like, I was worried about my energy levels coming into this conversation because I've been just deflated for the last 24 hours because I've just felt shame, like at every step of the direction. I feel full of shame. And I feel like when you're so attached to one organization that there's nothing that can happen for you to leave that organization or even question it, like they just own you. And to see
it's a cult. It's a cult.
Yeah, it's a cult. And to see like
see, we're talking about the fun. I apologize for interrupting you, but we're talking about the fun. So that's all I have. I have a meme that I respond to these people, and it just says, "You're in a cult 2020," and it's a format of a Trump Pence sign. And it's just like, that's my response to these people. Because you're 100% right. There's nothing that can happen at this point. There's no facts. There's no why. There's nothing. They're completely brainwashed. Now we're just getting political off the rails, but
yeah. I just lost half my listenership in this this little segue.
I'm sorry, I can't. I just can't. We don't have to include any of this stuff.
I don't care because it matters to me. Like we talked about Phil Galfond and integrity and the truth, and it actually matters in this world. And like, there's a lot of disinformation, and I think that the disinformation, the propaganda, is really at the root of a lot of this bullshit. And like, just verify what you're going to believe. If you're going to have a strong stance on something, fucking watch the full tape of what you're prophesizing. Like, just
It's so hard these days with the amount of misinformation out there to find the actual truth. It really is. And when you have somebody who is as powerful as the president of the United States spreading that misinformation, it just makes it very tough on the population to take the responsibility of digging deeper themselves. It does. It puts everybody in a tough spot. I think one of the reasons that I'm not as deflated, I'm a little bit more, well, two reasons. The obvious reason why I'm not low energy deflated what happened is because all my election bets are now final. So that's great news as of yesterday, is that I've gotten to finalize election bets and have gotten to collect on those. But the other reason is I think I'm a little optimistic that hopefully when people see something as insane as citizens storming the Capitol building, like in direct acts of domestic terrorism, some of those people are going to have a switch flipped and realize that, wait a second, this is insane. We're physically trying to take over the Capitol building of the United States. This can't be what we're fighting for, and just get some sort of reality check. And I'm hopeful that at some point that happens. And we did see it a little bit yesterday with the Senate confirmation hearings, where we originally had 12 to 13 senators that were planning on disrupting the proceedings and challenging the results. And that ended up dropping to 6 and then 7 in one state. But so I do think that hopefully maybe for some people with their sanity left, there's a chance to see the light.
Yeah, I think that there are good people that are very misled, and just please do your research. Like, try to find what is real and what is not real. And I listened to a whole podcast on disinformation and misinformation. It was Sam Harris, and they were talking about the real goal of misinformation and disinformation. It's that you don't believe anything that anybody says anywhere. Like, that's the ultimate goal from outside. You know, if Russia's interfering, if China's interfering, that's their ultimate goal. And like, that's the trap that I fall into, is that I just don't believe anything anybody says ever, because finding the truth of it is so fucking difficult that it's going to take me days, and then nobody's even going to care when I do it anyway.
But what you just said is so important. It is so hard now to find the truth that discourages a lot of people from even trying.
Yeah. And I'm trying to do a better job. I'm trying to actually try to find the truth in some things, but like, yeah, more work is not what I need in my life.
No.
I can't just
No.
drop everything I'm doing to.
And it's so frustrating but the issues are so important, right? You almost feel a moral obligation to look into them because this is the things that we're digging into are just so important, both for yourself, but for the future of the country and your kids and the type of world your kids are going to grow up in. So it's this catch-22 where it's like, it's brutal to find the truth, but you really are obligated to do so.
Yeah, the fabric of our society is at risk, and it's very sad and not something that I would have thought would happen in my lifetime. But
that's why I'm cautiously optimistic, is because I think people know that, and then when they see videos like you see yesterday of these type of people storming the Capitol building to take selfies, like, is that really the side you want to be on when the fabric of the country is at risk? Probably not.
Yeah, I mean, and people lost their lives, and there's a price to pay for all this stuff. It's just, all of it is just so unnecessary, in my opinion. Like I said, it deflated me.
Yeah, we are certainly, well, let's hope we are at the bottom.
I hope so. I really hope so. And on that high note, if you could gift all poker players one book to read, what would it be?
Ooh. Another. So this is not going to be. This is a bad answer. I apologize in advance for the bad answer to this question. But the best poker book that I have ever read by far is Corey Mikesell's 3-Bet Pots and PLO. And if you're not a PLO player, I apologize. But fuck, that guy is an absolute genius. And it's not intro level material, and it's a very expensive book. But man, if you are at all a PLO player and have the money to spend, he is a true genius of the game. And he illustrates the material in a very digestible way. I think he's the best at breaking down Monker Sims of anybody I've ever watched. And yeah, that would be my book.
So it's a minor upgrade from the Tom Chambers book from years past.
minor, small, yes.
I've told the story. I had a copy of the Tom Chambers book. I gave it to a friend of mine he's a math genius and a wizard. And like, when I gave him the book, 2 days later, he just sent me a text that was just like, so many numbers. Like, it is just numbers on numbers on numbers.
That makes sense. I was trying to look up real quick and find the price of his book, but I'm not sure. I know it's crazy.
I mean, at some level, like,
but yeah, that would be my book. I apologize to the 98% of you that are not going to ever be interested in taking a deep dive into a 3-bet PLO pot, expensive 3-bet PLO pot book that's for advanced PLO players. But it's the best I've read.
Yeah, and for 2% of the audience, you may have just changed their life and earned them a shitload of money over their career.
Maybe.
If you could wave a magic wand and change one thing about poker, what would it be?
These are such good questions. It would of course involve the notion that it's gambling.
Why does that matter to you so much?
Regulations in the U.S., I think, are one of the biggest reasons that we're forced to play in private games, and you get in a lot of shady, dangerous spots. If it was more widely just accepted as poker is a fun game to play, like chess, for example, I think it would be much more mainstream. The misconception feeds into the underground nature of the game. And for my own upbringing with my parents and the challenges I've gone through with that, and some family and friends accepting poker as a profession. I think that misconception is something that a lot of poker players go through and deal with, and their family thinking they're all a bunch of degenerate gamblers and that this isn't a real potential career path.
Yeah, one of the most commonly questions that I get asked, besides do you count cards, is are you addicted to gambling? Right. And it's just such an absurd question to me that it's laughable, right? But it's really sad that that's the common perspective.
It is. That is the perception out there, and it would be great if poker was looked closer to like chess as opposed to roulette.
And when you get to the higher levels of poker, right, just the diamond-like minds of these humans that you encounter, you just realize just like how much raw brain power is in the poker world at the highest levels. Like, and these guys, to be quite frankly, like, they play nosebleed poker, but they could probably do anything with their life. Like, unlimited potential, and to not be able to advertise these people, build them up, talk about their greatness is just, it's shameful to me. It's such a waste.
I completely agree. Some of these guys are just scary brilliant. The best example for me of that is True Teller. I personally think he's the best poker player on the planet. I actually think he's the best poker player ever. But in the few times that I've gotten to play with him, mostly at Triton, and heard him talk and say, he's just clearly one of those guys who could have picked any path in life and succeeded.
Yep. And these guys ought to be celebrated. They really ought to be. All right, we got a couple more questions. Then you can go off doing whatever it is that you do with your life.
Hit me.
If you could erect a billboard every poker player's got to drive past on the way to the casino, what's it say?
A billboard that every poker player, seat open.
Seat open. Let's go. What's something people would be surprised to learn that you're horrible at?
Art. Anything artistic. I don't mean draw. I mean anything artistic. I can't sculpt. I can't paint. I can't even visualize art. Just art.
What's your current big goal as it relates to poker?
Winning a PLO bracelet for sure. Since my PLO is really my game, and my bracelet came in short deck. That would be whenever WSOP comes around next. I would very much like to win a PLO bracelet.
Are you in the PLO tournament streets, like on the circuit?
Very much so.
The tournament streets.
Yeah, so I played a lot of the events. I had a real good chance to win a bracelet this summer in a PLO event. I played all the GG WSOP PLO events. I had a 70-30 for chip lead with 9 players left in one of the 2,500 PLO bracelet events. I play the PLO Masters events and those big events as well. So I final tabled other than the bracelet, my closest so far is I final tabled the 25K. I got 5th in the 25K PLO at the 2019 WSOP. But I would like to finish one of those off for sure. I think I've put a lot of time into my MTT PLO work. Well,
you're a young man. You've got a lot of time, and WSOP is running like 7 main event series every year. So you got a lot of chances.
I'm one of the, I unfortunately, that would not be the same for me. I want the live final table and the rail and the experience of winning it. Grinding it online would just not be the same.
Yeah. And hopefully next year we'll get vaccinated and we'll have a real chance at an actual WSOP.
Let's hope.
What's a project you're working on that's near and dear to your heart?
The Run-It Once staking program, for sure. They've just released Sit and Goes. I with you, think that because of what Phil's done in that site, they're just running poker the right way. I think that they will help the future of online poker. They've just released their Cube Sit and Goes, which I'm not going to get into the details here, but if you're interested in that, go take a look. And we're going to try to incorporate staking for cubes, for Sit and Goes now into our staking platform. And that's something that I've enjoyed being a part of. It's nice to be able to give back. Phil has done so much for me and my poker career personally, that being involved in something like that, where I feel like I'm positively contributing to the poker community, has been really nice.
And we'll segue to the last question of if the Chasing Poker Greatness audience wants to find you on the World Wide Webs, where do they look?
Yeah, I just Thallo Poker for pretty much everything, even just Google. But it's at Thallo Poker on Twitter. And then on that Twitter, there's a link to my Discord, which is what I use for the Run-It Once staking. I'm just Thallo on the Run-It Once forums, which is where all my coaching information is. And that's pretty much it. I try to stay away from personal social media or anything like that. So, and then twitch.tv/Thallo. I'm doing Galfond challenge commentary. Did some Doug Polk, Negreanu commentary with you as well. But yeah, twitch.tv/Thallo for streams and things like that.
What's the barrier to entry to, if somebody listening is interested in joining your staking program, what do they need to do?
We want to see volume more than anything. So my goal with that staking program is to bring new players onto Run-It Once. So if you are a player who play even recreational, but has decent hand volume, let's say anything around 5,000 hands a week, something like that, or even just getting close to 10 to 15,000 hands a month would be fine. And you're playing on the other sites currently, we will offer you a very good staking deal. If you're playing anything from let's say no limit 5, no limit or PLO 5, so $5 buy-ins up to no limit or PLO 200. Really, relatively, regardless of results, we're not backing all punters, but I'm not doing this to make a profit. We are doing this to get activity on to run at once.
And that's a very commendable thing. And being in the US, like if there was one poker platform that I would evangelize and love to support myself, it would be Phil Galfond and Run It Once.
Yep. This came about because of me. I had a lunch with Phil that I was thanking him for, everything he's done. I said, please, if there's anything I can ever do to give back, just let me know. And then a couple weeks later, called and said, hey, I know you're in the US, but we just need bodies. If there's anything you could help do to get bodies onto the site, while we're getting started, that's what we really need. And this was the best that I could do.
Man, it's been great having you on the show, learning more about you, hearing all of your stories, including the one where you almost died and punched somebody in the face in a private game.
People are going to think that's hyperbole, by the way. But if you ever get the chance to meet these guys, and you meet Tomer or any of these ex-Israeli military guys, you will understand this was not hyperbole.
I absolutely believe that there is no hyperbole involved. Like it's,
I had a tangible percentage that my life was ending that evening.
That is, chilling, terrifying.
I brought it on myself.
You did bring it on yourself, but it was kind of well-deserved on the other side too, right?
It was indeed.
It's pretty clear. I do say that there's probably not a risk that you're going to kill the guy. You're not going to take him out of the table, right?
No, but I couldn't get away with killing the other guy where I'm a relative nobody in that game, and these guys would have no problem burying my body.
The desert is very big and very easy to dispose of you.
Yep.
All right, man. Take care. I'd love to have you back on for round 2 sometime. Maybe if you get to 650 Twitter followers, you can, I'll have you back on. But
man, these Twitter follower needles are brutal. Not enough to make me actually care and try to find Twitter followers, but they are brutal.
If we were closer together, I'd be worried about getting punched in the face, but I feel pretty safe in my little cove right here.
Yeah. You know why I really tell that story just so people don't slow roll me.
I think, I don't even know. I don't know if it's incentive to not slow roll you or more incentive to slow roll you.
Oh God. Yeah. Let's hope not.
Got to be careful. All right, man.
Thank you very much for having me on. It's good to talk to you.
My pleasure, man. Take care.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Chasing Poker Greatness. If you have yet to subscribe to the show, please take a second to do so on Apple Podcasts or wherever your favorite place to listen to podcasts may be. For more content from me, Coach Brad, please visit our YouTube channel at youtube.com/enhanceyouredge, and I'll see you next time.